Welcome everyone. If you are watching this live, hello to you. especially if you are physically in Ludinghausen. That's I wanted to be there, but sadly, flights were just impossible to go there between some strange trips that I'm taking. But if you are watching this later on YouTube, feel free to reach out later on with some of the context that I have in case you are interested in this topic. So we are going to talk about inclusion, and we are going to try to understand how we can do development, and not just development, just everyday work, everyday interactions, to make sure that we have a way to get everyone, regardless of any limitations that anyone might have, and get everyone to work in the same way, with the same capabilities, with the same opportunities. So first of all, let me try this out. So first of all, my first slide is this. So one of the things that we don't usually use, and even AI doesn't use this that much, is sign language. Now, this sign language, there is a sign that says welcome, which is doing this with my hands. This is mostly an international sign that happens, as far as I can tell, in about 25 languages. The thing is, of course, if you consider all over the world, there are many more sign languages, at least more than 100 sign languages all over the world. And that is a very big limitation, because you think, well, maybe the sign language is unique. We can use the same sign language for everyone. Well, some things are unique. If you decide to insult people, there are also some gestures that are unique. So that's the other way around. But if you want to be inclusive and talk normally, etc., this one, extending your hand and saying hello, and lowering your hand. So maybe like this. Well, as you see in the image anyway, it doesn't show well in the camera, but that one is a very inclusive sign to say welcome. So there are a few other signs, of course, but one of the things that we get is, although there are some signs like this, most of them are very, very different. So you might actually be talking in a very inclusive language, in a language, and some other language that someone else recognizes, it might be an insult. Okay, even something as simple as this, the thumb sign, where you say a like on Facebook and a few other places, that is actually considered an insult in a certain amount of countries. And that could be a problem, because you want to be as inclusive as possible, and sometimes this is just not easy, okay? So to do that, there are other technologies, and hopefully, for instance, instead of sign language, we can actually have things like subtitles. So for instance, if you go for let's say this is, I'm doing this in PowerPoint, and you can actually get subtitles here just by clicking a button. This is actually very, very easy. Okay, so I'll get back to that one in a second, but this is actually very easy to do. Okay, and one of the advantages here actually is that this can actually translate from the language I'm speaking, which is English, to a few other languages as well. If you are using Teams, Teams also has the capability of having subtitles in the bottom, which is very easy. And if you pay the right license, which now is licensed, you can actually translate it into the right language. Okay, so let's actually move on. So Frank, as you know, I have a cat, and she's actually at home, so she's taking care of my castle, or her castle, as I've been told. It's not my house, it's her house, because she's the one that lives there. And this is me. My name is André Melancia, and I'm going to show you my usual slide, which is a slide with all my presentations, but I will tell you in a minute how bad this is, okay? So in this kind of presentation, I wanted to do something simple, but then the first presentation I did about this, I've been doing quite a lot of them regarding accessibility. One of the things that someone told me is this is a great a slide to show you all of the things you shouldn't be doing. Okay, so we'll get back to the slide, but as you can see, letters are small, a lot of different colors, a lot of different problems, a lot of motion as well. So you got all of the motion of things moving around, etc. We'll see how bad this is. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This is a much simpler a slide. So this one has no motion whatsoever, just has the right information. So a few letters, black and white. It doesn't have to be black and white. You can have different colors, but these colors are fairly simple. Okay, and one of the things that you see is a symbol that has been used since the 90s. This is a European initiative that has been used since the 90s. Initially, this was an initiative about racism and making sure that everyone was treated equal, etc. So all different, all equal. Some countries translated it the other way around, all equal, all different. It depends on the country. It doesn't really matter. But the translation in Portuguese, for instance, is todos diferentes, todos iguais, which is literally the exact translation of those words. But that has grown to different meanings over time. And nowadays you can include situations where people have some sort of disability or limitation, and they obviously should be included as well. So everyone, regardless of their situation, whether it is just simple things like color of skin or gender or sexual orientation, whatever, and even going to the level of disabilities that we're talking today, everyone should be treated equal. So in this case, this is actually a brand that started in a very simple way in European initiatives and has grown to a lot of different levels. Okay, so I decided to add this. I know we're not in pandemic anymore, but I am remote, and we do have people remotely, so I felt it is a good idea to show that we do have live captions to be used if we have to. Okay. So let me just mention, as just to continue as I was mentioning here. So we do have some of these European initiatives, and even the Treaty of the European Union, the Treaty of Lisbon, actually has the logic of having. Oh, by the way, my camera is on this side, and I have very far away in this hotel room, I have an actual screen. So apologies for always looking to this side because it is very far away, like 90 degrees, okay? But it's the only possibility to be able to do this. Anyway, the Treaty of Lisbon actually mentions a few things that I highlighted in a different color, in this case blue. So things like human dignity actually apply to a lot of different situations. So if you go on a bus and there was someone who is elderly and has some difficulty standing up, of course, we've learned this since we were kids. You should give the seat to that person so that person can sit. If someone has a broken leg or I don't know, something like that, you obviously say, oh, please sit here, of course, right? So we are at this level where we as humans naturally understand that it is a good idea to be able to guarantee that the other person next to us already has some accessibility guaranteed. Okay, it's not perfect. Obviously there's that joke, oh, why didn't you give the seat to that person on the bus? And I said, well, I can't. Oh, you are terrible, or are terrible. No, I'm the driver of the bus. Okay, so I cannot give the seat to anyone. So obviously there's that joke, but of course anyone else should be able to give the seats to someone else. And then we have a built-in human logic of there's a priority. So if someone feels like they are in a bigger pain than someone else, so someone elderly but can still be on the bus, will probably give it to the person who has a broken leg, or vice versa, depending on the situation. So we as humans, we evaluate this in a dynamic way, but we still try to be as fair as possible to the other human being. Okay, so of course, equality and especially human rights are built into this. So everyone has the right to be equal. Okay, and this is actually very important. So of course, last one is that solidarity part that I was just mentioning of giving up the seat on the bus, which is of course important. Now let me move on to the next slides. Oh, I do have also a problem here with my mouse, but there are so many workarounds in the computer. It's a good idea to mention this. I'm having some issues with my mouse because for some reason, some Lenovo computers are really, really good. I like them, but the mouse has some weird bug. I don't think it's a Lenovo problem. I think it's Windows 11 problem because it happens at the same time in my computers, and then it stops happening and suddenly everything works at the same time, and then at the same time both computers stop working again. So I feel that this is more of a Windows thing than it is a Lenovo thing. But anyway, I could also have an external mouse, but it's not convenient at this moment. Anyway, so just mentioning one last thing, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and of course we have disability. Old age is actually a consideration, okay? So if you consider that someone who is older will have not necessarily a disability, there are people who are much older than me. They are old enough to be my grandparents, I guess, and some of them over 100 years old are still running the marathon, okay? There's also a running joke about that, running joke anyway, that someone is over 100 years old, finished the marathon, and you ask someone who is my age or younger, and they say, "Oh, why did that person get ahead of you in the marathon? He is 100 years old." Yeah, but he had longer time to prepare. So of course, it's a weird joke, but this is true. It doesn't really matter how old you are. Sometimes you have if you work in IT like us, it's very easy because usually your body survives over the years. But if you work a hard working job in which you have physical effort, your body will be very deteriorated by the time you're my age or by the time you retire. So in that case, people age in a different way, and we have to respect how people age. Okay, so some of these, let me mention one last thing. For instance, that last one actually happened to me and probably happened to a lot of people. I never had a leg broken or anything like that, fortunately, but I did have a situation in the first year of the pandemic. I'm not sure what the circumstances were, but I had some issues with my eyes in which my eyes were very red, and after a while, for about a month, I almost couldn't see anything. So I was not blind. I was still able to see blurry things. So I was able to kind of work with the computer. If you decided to go here, oh, let's increase the size of the font, etc. I was still able to work with the computer, but I wasn't able to work at the usual level where I have a very small computer here, which is, I don't know, your 14 inches, something like that, and I still have full HD on my computer. So obviously that resolution and crazy resolutions on your phone were completely impossible to do using this. Okay, but I was still able to do it in some capacity because there were services that you can have on a computer on a cell phone, etc., that allow you to work with things without having high resolutions, etc. So no worries, I'm better with my eyes, etc. But I was actually worried for about a month when I was without good vision because imagine I work in IT. What if and I travel a lot around the world. If I cannot see, how will I be able to travel? How will I be able to work? How will I be able to develop, program things, etc.? It just seems impossible. But the thing is, I actually know someone who is blind, and he is my good friends for over 20 years, and he works in IT. And when I met him, he was working in IT. He is a system administrator, and he is blind, completely blind. Now, how is that even possible? Well, the answer is very easy. If you work in IT, but you are able to use command line, you can be blind. That's no problem because as long as you have some technologies, and I'll show some of these technologies later on, you are able to interact with an actual computer in a very easy way. Is it 100% independent? The answer is no, because there are always some limitations, but it is mostly independent, that you can actually work with the computer, do command line things. In fact, if you consider Microsoft, well, let's consider Linux first. So Linux, most of the things are done in a command line. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. Okay, so user interfaces, graphical user interfaces have only been around in Linux for many years already, but they are not typical if you are working with Linux, not as an end user, but let's say as a developer, or let's say as system administrator of servers. You typically use command line. And if you use command line, something that has a sequence, yeah, and it is mostly text, it is fairly easy for someone who's blind to accommodate to that. Okay. Is it perfect? No. Does it take longer? Yes. If you ever try to read Braille, for instance, you can tell that, well, with the fingers, it's almost impossible, at least for me. But if you actually try to see the dots and try to convert them in your head, it is very difficult. But then again, if you understand, let's say, English language and other languages, you can learn different languages. You can even learn languages like Ukrainian, Greek, other languages that have different alphabets, and you have double trouble. So you have the trouble of understanding the actual language, and you have trouble of understanding how the language is written because it's a different alphabet. Braille is exactly the same thing. It doesn't make that much of a difference. Okay, so let me show you that it is possible to work in information systems like this. Coming back from Linux to Microsoft, Microsoft has been a mostly graphical interface, but since 2000 and maybe 2006, 2007, something like that, around the time of Windows Vista, there was a formal requirement for Microsoft that every single thing that you did in the operating system and in the products had to have some way of scripting it. At the time, we thought, oh, it's just for automation, and this was around the time of beginning of DevOps and things like that. So it is mostly for automation. The answer is yes and no. It is also for the reason that everything that you do should be able to be done in a command line, because anyone with any kind of disability should be able to work like this. Okay, so think of yourself as connecting to the computer via SSH commands, or remote management, something like that, with PowerShell, and trying to connect and just doing everything in your computer, but as a command line. It is possible. Technically, it is possible for the last almost 20 years. Okay, so nothing wrong with that. Okay, so let's mention a few things before we actually continue. This is a form that I saw, and remember one thing, that there's the technology and there's also the human side of things. And one of the human side of things is perception. So while a lot of people are saying, yes, we want to make sure that anyone with any kind of disability is welcome, there is no problem, we'll guarantee this, etc. For instance, one of the things that we always guarantee when we have events in Lisbon, we had Global AI in Lisbon 1 month ago, 1.5 months ago. We have so many beautiful rooms in the university that we're in, University of Lisbon, School of Management and Economics, but the big problem that we have there is the most beautiful rooms are not as accessible. Well, they are, but they are not as conveniently as accessible. So what we do is, instead of going to the very beautiful rooms that take great photos at the end of the day, we actually go to the room that's next to the parking lot, in which everything is horizontal. Honestly, it's also about logistics, because it's very easy to move things from the car there, because it's only a few meters as well. Otherwise, we'll have to walk up all the way crazy up the hill. But to be honest, one of the reasons is we want to guarantee accessibility, and accessibility is very, very horizontal if we have that specific room, which is very small. Okay, so we try to do it in that more inclusive way. We ignore kind of the nice scenarios to guarantee inclusiveness, and that actually works. But this is from some event in the United States, California somewhere, I think. It's not a Microsoft event. It's some other event that I saw, maybe on Sessionize, maybe somewhere else. And they had these requests so that you enter some talk. So you would say presentation, experience, etc., some other questions in the beginning, and then you say, how do I identify yourself? Okay, you can identify yourself as female, male, or non-binary. Honestly, I don't like the term non-binary. I find it very insulting because non-binary just puts everyone who is very different beyond female and male, puts it in just a single category, and who cares about you? It's just you, okay? Technically, there are some 18 different extra genders recognized, although of course we won't use most of them. But I can tell you that I know a lot of people who are um, female, male, but other different genders, and some of them are non-gender. They do not correspond with a specific gender, and that is okay. So to actually bundle it up in the category is wrong. Again, the fourth one, which is LGBTQ and a few other letters in the mix, that is also very confusing because you are confusing a lot of different things. The T there stands for what we just talked about the first three items on the list. But the first one and the second one are actually related to sexual orientation, which has nothing to do with gender. It's a completely different thing. So to just mix it up is just wrong. And all of the other ones are related to race. And some of them are just related to where you live, which is completely absurd. So to actually mix all of these together, to pretend to be inclusive and say, oh, we're politically correct, we are inclusive, and then add such stupidity is just wrong, okay? You don't have to put a message there to say we are inclusive. You really shouldn't even have to say anything. You can just be inclusive without having to say we're inclusive. Oh, I have pronouns. Oh, I have this, I have that. That's just wrong, okay? You can have pronouns to be acceptable to other people. One of the things, for instance, that people put in pronouns, I've seen a guy who's a complete idiot on Twitter actually put pronouns on that and actually insult and try to roast someone who refuses to put pronouns. And that is just wrong because I know people who are transgender and they really don't want to put pronouns because they feel they are one way and society views them as a different way. And if they put pronouns, they are being outed, okay? So they don't want to out themselves. So you can be inclusive by allowing people to out themselves whenever they can. But unlike that guy, I'm not going to mention names, but unlike that guy, you shouldn't actually force people. That is the opposite of what you should be doing. That is actually harassment and really bad one. Okay. So moving on from this list and actually talking about some of the solutions that we have. So don't mix all of these things, as I was mentioning, it's just wrong, okay? Be inclusive. Being inclusive is not telling everyone that you are inclusive. Being inclusive is just solving problems. So this one, what you see here, there is a problem with the slides. That problem is that horizon squares thing, okay? So in some scenarios of neurodisabilities, that thing can actually be confusing. If you have floors with multiple different colors, like tiling in small colors, small pixelated sized colors, you go crazy because that thing, you think that that thing is moving around. Even I, that don't feel I have those kinds of limitations, sometimes I see a tiled floor or tiled wall, and I get very, oh, this is very confusing for me because it feels like the whole wall or the whole floor is moving, and that just feels, after a while you feel uncomfortable in that environment. Okay, so things like strobing lights gets you very uncomfortable as well. So those kind of things in a presentation should actually avoid it. So I'm not sure this one exactly. So you can definitely see this one. This movement is actually very bad for people. Uh, did I put there that in other presentations? Yes, I did. Am I reconsidering for the last 2 or 3 years to put these kinds of transitions on slides in presentations? Yes, I am. Sometimes they are there, but I am reconsidering them, putting simple transitions now because that is indeed a problem. Okay, so the first slide is actually less of a problem. This was done about 2 years ago, so similar slides. Okay, I had a different name for this because presentations change name. This one was done also about 2 years ago. Um, this one is much worse because this one has a problem with colors. So if you can see the full color spectrum like I do, this is okay. But you have multiple problems. First of all, the background is weird. So to actually read the colors in front becomes weirder, okay? At the same time, it is actually very confusing to be able to read that strange fonts with that color, with the background color. So all of these together make it very strange. Plus the red here. Red is usually an okay color, but in this situation, with this font, it looks bad. So make sure that the fonts, whenever you present a font, whenever you put a font in a phone application, in a website, something like that, make sure that those fonts are correctly visible. Okay, one of the ways that you can actually do that is make sure that you don't have 20 different types of color. If you consider Facebook, I don't like the colors of Facebook, but they are visible because they have people that guarantee accessibility. Okay, Twitter not so much, but they do have accessibility on Twitter, but not the color part. But anyway, moving on. So the banner, for instance, is very invisible, very difficult to view. In this case, because it's mostly small. Okay, and in some details, of course, like a very small cat here, you're not going to be able to see it. It's just, but this wasn't the objective anyway. But if your objective was to see that very small cat, you would not be able to see it. Okay, this one, another example that we saw before. This one actually had less images at the time, but these are very difficult because first of all, they show up like randomly. So that confuses you if you have some neurodisability that's like epilepsy is a good example, for instance, that's suddenly if things are popping up suddenly, that becomes very, very difficult for you to do things. And one of the other issues that you have is in the case of epilepsy, you might actually get seizures if something like this happens. Okay, so be very careful when you raise animations, colors, of course, right? But when you raise animations, transitions in slides, etc., small, slow animations are usually fine. Very fast animations are usually not okay. In terms of backgrounds, be careful with the backgrounds. Make sure that there is a good contrast between the foreground and background. Some people say, oh, it has to be black and white. It has to be certain colors. No, you see the green line around that area. That green line could have been any color. That can be any texture. Be careful with textures as well. But I chose green because green was very distinctive from all of the other colors. If I chose blue, that could be confused with some of the blue on the right. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. We have people that are colorblind. Some people don't see red, some people don't see blue, some people don't see green, mostly reds. We know from experience that everyone talks about red. It's not just red, it's actually different spectrums of color. But the most famous one we see in films is usually the red one. Okay, it's not true. Okay. Um, so anyway, so images as well. If you add an image, and I'll give you an example like this. If I do a presentation and I have someone who is blind in the audience, usually that person sits in the front row. Okay, it's not about, oh, I could sit in the back row. It doesn't really matter because I'm blind. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's just that when you have a blind person usually sits in the front of the audience to make sure that the speaker of that conference, speaker, teacher, whatever it is, that they know that there is a blind person and they should pay more attention to that situation when they present a session. Okay, and I usually look around the audience. If someone who's is blind and they are in the back row, how the hell would I know? It's just impossible. Okay, but if it is in the front row, I can adjust my presentation to be sure that this is okay. So for instance, I can go to the presentation and say, look, we have an image on the left that has an ugly guy on the left of that image, and then it has this, it has that, etc. I can actually speak it and explain what the image has. If the image is just a funny joke on the right or something like that, I'm not even going to bring it up. It's irrelevant for the presentation, okay? It's just a comedy relief. It doesn't really matter, so I'll just ignore it, okay? But if it is relevant for the presentation, I will literally describe the image because it makes sense, okay? It is important. If you are developing an application, for instance, if you are developing a website or something like that, there are a few rules. I'll get into that just in a second. There are a few rules you need to take into consideration. One of them is no clutter, okay? Don't add useless things you're not going to need, or at least don't put them in the middle of things. I'll give you a very simple example that has nothing to do with disabilities. If you go to a website for news and suddenly there's, or just you click on something on Facebook that has some funny jokes and you want to see it, and they start with a story and then there's advertising, then they continue another paragraph, advertising, another paragraph, advertising. You know, after 2 or 3 advertisings, you just give up and you leave because it's more advertising than it is content. You have to keep scrolling, and even if you have an ad blocker, you have holes in the middle that gets you very confused anyway. So after a while, it gets tired for you to actually read it, and you just move away and go away, right? So if you have advertising, if you have pop-ups, like you have in a lot of news sites where they have 2 or 3 different pop-ups, would you like to see notifications? Here's some advertising for you from our sponsors. Oh, here's this that might relate to you. Here's this, here's that. And then you see the news. You're not doing a good job in terms of inclusiveness, okay? Same thing if you are developing for mobile. If you are developing for mobile, you have a very big problem. Mobile is usually asynchronous. So when you click on something, a lot of other things might pop up around it, okay? And it becomes difficult because sometimes I just want to click here, but suddenly there's a pop-up somewhere else that forces you to do some other task first. That is very annoying. If you have someone with any kind of limitation, let's say motor limitation, like difficulty to use your hands or something like that, in that case, that becomes very, very difficult to use, okay? And if you are blind and have a computer and use a screen reader, that's even more impossible. You're trying to read something, suddenly they're talking about advertising. And if you are blind, the screen reader just reads things in a loud voice, for instance, or using Braille, but it doesn't really distinguish that you stop talking about the normal content of the news and suddenly you talk about the the advertising. It mixes all together, and sometimes it gets you confused. This is normal, okay? So yeah, basically everything is something to consider. Now we have, and again, this one is a much calmer animation. This could be considered acceptable. This is a film. Let me make sure that we have audio here.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the Pivot Head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I see 2 faces, 40-year-old man with a beard looking surprised, 20-year-old woman looking happy.
The app can describe the general age and gender of the people around me and what their emotions are, which is incredible. One of the things that's most useful about the app is the ability to read out text.
Hello, good afternoon. Here's your menu.
Great, thank you. I can use the app on my phone to take a picture of the menu, and it's going to guide me on how to take that correct photo,
Move camera to the bottom right and away from the document.
and then it'll recognize the text. Read me the headings.
I see appetizers, salads, paninis, pizzas, pastas.
Years ago, this was science fiction. I never thought it would be something that you could actually do, but artificial intelligence is improving at an ever faster rate, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this. As engineers, we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, building on top of what went before. And in this case, we've taken years of research from Microsoft Research to pull this off.
I think it's a young girl throwing an orange frisbee in the park.
For me, it's about taking that far-off dream and building it one step at a time. I think this is just the beginning.
Okay, so let me just move on from that video. Okay, so this video, you might think, oh, this is great, this is new, this is amazing. No, this is 2016 or something like that. Okay, so this is something like 8 years old or a bit more. That application called Seeing AI, I have good news. I think the last time I presented this session, I said, oh, it's only available for iOS, etc. No, if you go there today, it is available for Android. I have to admit, I haven't tried it because I have an Android phone. I have not tried it, but I clicked on this link just to make sure, 1 hour before doing this presentation, I clicked on these links to make sure that they worked, etc., etc. And I clicked on Seeing AI to make sure it was still there. And suddenly there's a link to the Android store. And I thought I have to try it. Oh, I have to do the session first. So one of the things I'm going to do today is to download that app and try it out and see how it works, because I'm very, very interested in seeing this. And if you have someone who you know is blind, just point them in this direction, give them the app. The app is completely free. You can just use the app and have access to all of this. It's not new. And if you work in IT, as you saw in the example, someone who actually is blind is developing the app as well, okay, along with another team that tests this out, etc. So you can see that this is some of the ways of using technology, but we need to see how this technology works. So the Seeing AI app is something very, very interesting. Please give it a try. So let me just mention a few of the problems condensed into a list now, so that we can find some solutions for this technologically. Okay, so some of these problems, we have a technological solution. We saw the if you are blind, you have some apps and some things. You have things that reads things out loud from your computer. It's good. I will have another slide that shows you a few more things, but we do have some technical solutions. But there's also human solutions. I mentioned, oh, someone who is old or has a broken leg. And remember, a broken leg is a temporary situation. But still requires our help, so give them a seat on the bus. That is a human solution, okay? Not everything has a technological solution. Sometimes a human solution is more than enough. You see an old lady with a lot of groceries carrying things, just help them out. Are you going somewhere close here? Well, I can help you with your groceries. Here you go. And you walk a few kilometers, well, a few meters anyway, hopefully not a few kilometers, but you walk a few meters, which for you is nothing, just carrying a few bags. And for an older lady, that is so much effort, and maybe she's not going to be in back pain for the rest of the day, and she will be able to sleep well at night. Okay, so that is a small difference. You can make a small difference with the community. Okay, so a few more things. So all of these things, education, upbringing, etc., the society in general is very different. If you go to certain countries, they just ignore this. In Europe, this is mostly guaranteed. Okay, so I mentioned some of these situations are permanent, others are temporary. If you break a leg, it's temporary. I had some vision impairment a few years ago. It actually came back sometime later, but then it got better again. Now I'm at, I would say, 90%, something like that. but I still consider that my situation was temporary. But I was very worried at the time that I could go blind. But once I started to see all of these technologies existing, I thought, well, if I do, I'm not going to stress as much as I should stress 10 years ago or something like that, because there are technological solutions. It will just piss me off for a year or something until I learn how to deal with the new reality. But then after that, I will be able to work, I don't know, 70% of the level that I had before, work and do things, which 70% is still a very good level if you have a perfect vision, a perfect scenario on every level. If you go down to 70%, that's pretty much the same as being old age, okay? So to be able to do 70% of things, even if you don't have vision, etc., that's still a very good scenario, and technology can help you with that, okay? So let's have a look at some of the technologies that are available for this. You are blind, okay? So we have things that read out loud for you, okay? So some of these, we have examples of this. So if I go here to some website, oh, wait a minute, sorry. I stopped sharing accidentally. It's the Teams thing that pops up, my fault. So if you start to go, for instance, to Azure.com, for instance, oh, I don't want the pricing page. That's an awful page to go to. Sorry about that. It's just automatic. So if you go to the pricing page, or outside of the pricing page to the main page, you have a huge text. That huge text, if you are blind, so let's say I navigate here. How do I navigate here? So you can actually say, so I am here. You can go to Alt-D and go to the address and navigate from there. So there are some keyboard shortcuts. If you are old school like me, you know most of them, okay? Younger generation, the Google generation doesn't know the shortcuts, but these shortcuts actually help, okay? I actually have, not this computer, but another computer in which the shift key didn't work. So I wanted to copy paste. How the hell do I copy paste? It's very difficult. Well, there are other ways to do copy paste with older keys. They still work, and suddenly I am able to do it, okay? So if you have shortcut keys, they will work. Tab is your friend, especially. But one of the things that you have here, Control-Shift-U, you don't have to memorize this in most cases, but you can. You can actually click on this. Okay, so this is actually speaking things very slowly. If you are blind, trust me, you're going to configure this to be much faster, okay? Over time, you get used to this, you configure it to read it much faster because you want to read things faster. That is one way. If you do control Windows O, and here's an irony for you. So if you do Control Windows O, you have a keyboard, okay? So now if you're, instead of being blind, if your problem is a different one. So let's say it's a mechanical one, something like that. You cannot touch it's the opposite. Let's say the situation with Stephen Hawking was the opposite. He could not write on a keyboard because obviously he had some impairments in terms of motion, but he used this vision and also some weird cheek thing as well to actually point to the right place on the keyboard and click on the keys. I'll give you an example. My current computer doesn't use the O key. So to actually say Control Windows O, I cannot do this, okay? So what's the solution? There is a power toy that remaps the O key to a different key. This is what I'm currently using in this computer, okay? I need to replace the keyboard, but I need a lot of time to do this. It takes a long time to take a computer apart and do it right because the thermal stuff, whatever, you have to leave it for a week to test it. So you cannot just take it out. But anyway, to do this, there is a solution. You map the key somewhere else. Power toys can do that, okay? I discovered that when I had this keyboard problem. If you always need to click on a key and it's very difficult for your hands in a specific scenario, just move the keys, okay? Use Power Toys, move the keys. Very, very easy to do, okay? Microsoft Power Toys. Anyway, on-screen keyboard, you have this, you have others. You can do touch screen if this is better for you, okay? For instance, one of the sessions that I delivered was with someone that didn't have the possibility of using small fingers, so the keyboard keys were much, much bigger, okay? Or touch screen or something like that, okay? So it is very different how you can operate these kind of things. Besides this, there are a few other shortcuts. So if you go, let me just move this out for accessibility here. So if you go for accessibility, you can actually say text size, make it bigger, of course, visual effects, etc. So one of the things that I do is I've used this for presentations, but this is something that exists for years, which is you click on Control. You don't see it anywhere in Windows 11 anymore, but you can still go to the registry and do this hack to actually click on this so that you point to the place where the mouse is. Very practical. You don't have to have any kind of disability to understand how useful this is if you have multiple screens. But anyway, magnifier, Windows plus, Windows minus, okay? Very simple keyboard thing, okay? So, so you can actually do that, okay? So different colors, etc. But then you have hearing, audio. But captions is the one that I'm looking for here, okay? So you can actually say live captions and say on and just turn on the live captions. Now this actually, sorry about this, give me a second. This actually showed up on this screen on this side, okay? So how do I move this position? Overlaid on screen. So maybe I can move this like this. Okay. So you can actually read the captions. I would have to configure it. Forgive me for not being for not being done. Include microphone audio. So you can actually say blah blah blah. I'm speaking something, etc., etc. This actually takes what you see in YouTube videos and things like that and puts captions on it, literally, okay? You can use this. This comes with Windows 11. It's just that easy. And yes, you can do multiple languages. You cannot translate, but you can do multiple languages. You have to specify what language you want to hear, okay? Now, one of the things that I've been doing this session is we still have about 10 minutes, but I haven't, I've shown you some technologies, but I haven't really told you what technologies are behind this, okay? The actual names of things, because you can actually develop things yourself that use these kinds of technologies. It is actually very, very easy. So I will spend the next minutes doing that. So anyway, visual alternatives to sounds, etc. So there are many accessibility options that you have here, different layouts of keyboard, mouse. You can invert the mouse. For instance, some people use the mouse the other way around. So I usually use the mouse like most people, like the buttons are in the front, right? However, some people have the mouse and they use the mouse upside down where the buttons are in the back. And sometimes going forwards and going backwards, for them, they prefer the opposites. You can configure this. It's no problem, okay? So there are different ways. Eye control, the example that you could use maybe if you had a situation like Stephen Hawking, okay? By the way, he didn't use that much eye control. He used mostly a cheek motion thing, okay? That's what I actually used, but this was a historical thing. He was given the opportunity to use eye control, etc. He just decided that he preferred the other one for whatever reasons, okay? So everyone's different. Everyone should use different things. Don't force a specific solution on someone with a disability. Give them all the range of the options. Let them choose the right one for them, okay? So give me a second. Okay, so a few different things. So if you are blind, that means you are 100% blind. If you are visually impaired, that means you can still see a few things, but you have some limitations. If you are colorblind, you can do that solution by high resolution things, etc. You can actually change the way that the computer looks, even force the web pages to look different, okay? And spoiler alert, if you have a website, in 90% of the cases, all you have to do is to say, you can still develop things in the same way, just change your CSS, okay? It's just as easy as this. The best example for you to see what a blind person sees is turn off the CSS in your computer, in your websites, okay? If you turn off your CSS, suddenly you see all text in a row, and you will be able to see from top to bottom exactly what a blind person sees, okay? And it's sometimes not easy to navigate your websites, okay? So please be careful with that. Anyway, if you have epilepsy, I mentioned this before, what if you cannot hear? That is a real problem. What if you cannot hear? In that case, you can see subtitles. That's fine. It's one of the examples. People are speaking, you can see subtitles. Windows has this. A phone has this. You can do this with a phone as well. So nothing wrong with that. If you have the exact opposite, what if you have no voice, like we had with Stephen Hawking? Well, you can let's say that your only problem is I have no voice. 2 months ago or 1 month ago, I was in India doing a presentation. My voice did come back, so it was okay. I wasn't the only speaker, but can you imagine being in front of 1,000 people and not being able to speak? It would be terrible. In this case, if it was that size of an audience, I had someone else presenting with me, so we ended up okay. My voice was still terrible. It felt like I was completely drunk, but it was okay. But what if you are doing this just one-on-one, just trying to communicate with people, like in a business meeting or something like that? Well, it's much easier. If you have no voice, write down the things and ask to speak it out loud. You have technology for this in Windows. It's literally free, okay? So just use it, okay? And even if it doesn't get spoken out loud, the other person on the other side can actually see it in written text. So you can have a Teams meeting between people in the same room, and the chat will tell you all the other person is saying. So you do have technology. Use it any way you want, any way it's practical for you, but just use it, okay? So what if you have mobility challenges? So difficulty with hands, with anything like that. So you can control things with your eyes, you can control things with your voice. Nowadays, you can have the Copilot for Windows. I haven't tried much of it, but in the future, that will actually say, turn on program this, turn on program that, and it will be useful, not at this moment, by the way, but in the future, it will be useful for someone with that kind of problems, or just someone who's lazy, which will be most of the cases, sadly. But if someone has some problems with being able to use their hands or reaching the computer in some reasons, you can do voice commands and that will still work. What about the neurodiversity challenges? I will leave that to the next slides. Okay, this one is a tough one. Okay, now one of the things that I want to show you is this message. I will leave for the next slide the neurodiversity challenges, but in this one is very important. If you want to test a website to make sure someone who's blind can see it, put a blindfold on. Try to use the computer like that. Not kidding, do it, okay? If you want to test someone who cannot hear, just cover your eyes, turn down the volume, do whatever you have to do. Walk in the same shoes as them, okay? This is the only way you can test it, okay? Most of the websites I developed, not so much lately, but in the past, I actually gave most of them to my friend who's blind, and I told him, tell me what you can see. And joke intended, of course. We actually use that joke a lot. And he would tell me, oh, I can see this, I can see that, okay? And he would say, oh, be careful with this, be careful with that. The accessibility guidelines, WCAG, which are the accessibility guidelines, half of those guidelines are useless, okay? Ask a blind person, they are completely useless. Focus on the ones that are really, really useful. Ignore the other ones. Go to blogs, see what they say. After a while, you develop a mentality of developing using things like alt text, which are extremely important for images, guaranteeing that you have all alternative keys whenever you have shortcuts like using Alt1, Alt2, Alt3, Alt4, Alt5. You can do that on Facebook. Is it Alt or Control? Depends on or if you're using Windows or if you're using Macs, etc. There's either the Control or Alt or whatever key that you can use that conjunction with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that jumps into a shortcut on Facebook and in other places. Okay, that's very useful for someone who's blind. Okay, and those accessibility guidelines, if you learn them and if you start to program with them, you get used to them. And then you can use the validators of those guidelines, and they will tell you, you're missing this, you're missing that. In the beginning, it feels annoying, but after a while, you start programming with those guidelines, okay? Now, just to mention some neurodiversity challenges, autism is indeed a problem. There are things, attention deficit disorder, for instance. So these are very different problems. One of them has to be very focused. The other one, someone can get unfocused very easily with any kind of distraction, okay? But in any of these cases, if you have a computer and suddenly things are moving and popping up and not doing things as predicted, you get very pissed off. And a website, an app, is very annoying for anyone. And if you have any of these limitations, that's even worse. Okay, and I can tell you that I've had students in which their problem is they need to be encouraged to study, etc., and get some focus on this. And their problem wasn't even they were diagnosed with things like cognitive delay, etc. In reality, they're not being given the right attention to the right things. Okay, sometimes the solution is not, oh, give them some pills or something like that, they'll get better. It's actually the opposite. Okay, they need to be addressed with the problem that they have specifically and address their problem. Okay, also some environmental problems can occur, and one of the things that I can tell you is I've talked to people in most places, and they say, oh, my limitation is that my computer is very old, I'm very poor, I have a very old computer, it doesn't do this. Okay, so that is still a limitation, whether you consider it or not. It's not a disability, but in the end it becomes a social disability because you cannot do the same things other people can do. Okay, even different languages. In the beginning of the chat, people were speaking in German. I can understand it a bit, but not to that level. So I had some difficulty understanding. There's translation for that. Okay, so very, very quickly, because we are almost out of time. Okay, let me just say about the cognitive services, how you can use them. So technologically, most of them are just a service in which you connect to that web service, you get a return of what happens. And in this case, in most cases, the image that we saw in the video, identifying the people, etc., you get rectangles with coordinates. So you get those coordinates in JSON formats, and you say, this is a person, this is an object, this is something else. It's very easy to program for this. And in this green one, which typically is a server of yours, not typically the web app directly, sorry, the app on the phone directly, but that part will actually tell you that you need to show something nice to the user. So you can do your magic on the green area there. Okay, get whatever the cognitive services generates and do some magic with it. Okay, so before I go into questions, let me just quickly mention some of the cognitive services. We didn't have time to actually show them that much. This is my Azure portal. Sorry about that. But let me show you some of these that can actually work. So computer vision was one of the things that you saw that was used to see things and identify things and tell, yeah, it's a dude with a skateboard or showing a frisbee or a dog or whatever. That was computer vision that you saw. Face API has some limitations. You have to get your lawyers to talk to Microsoft lawyers before you can use it now, but the Seeing AI app allows you to use it without any kind of authorization, so you can just use it. Custom vision might not be as interesting for you unless you are focusing on specific objects. Let's say you want a conveyor belt to, every time that there's a can of Coke or a can of Fanta or something else, you say, I want this one, let's pick it up. So you can do AI with IoT and pick up just specific objects, or a conveyor belt with fruits and say, good fruits continues, bad fruit gets moved out with a robotic arm, for instance, okay? Or even to detect things in an exhibit in a supermarket to actually detect, oh, we have all of this. Intelligent fridges, they will take photos of what you have and say, we need to buy more. That's how they use it. Custom vision, they know what kind of things are supposed to be there. And if you don't have enough on the list, they will ask for more. Speech service, so speech to text, text to speech. You can use the Microsoft ones, or you can use the OpenAI ones. I still prefer the cognitive services one, or AI services as they call it now. The OpenAI is not as good at the moment as the cognitive services, okay? I still prefer the cognitive services. They are better, available in much more languages with much nicer voices. This can change in the future, but at this moment, this is my opinion, okay? So speech, text, text to speech, you saw that working for free in PowerPoint. Oh, I don't know how to use this. I would like to use it, but my Windows is only Windows 10. It doesn't allow this. Have PowerPoints. Use PowerPoint. Pretend to do a presentation or don't do anything at all. Just get the subtitles there. It just works, okay? Or you can use the one with Windows 11. I can't remember the shortcut keys. Sorry about that, but I think it's L. Windows Control L or something like that to pop up the captions. You can use that in speech service. Language service might not be as interesting for you. That just recognizes the texts. So for that, you could use things like OpenAI, but for different reasons, not as interesting for disability. But if you want to have a bot to interact with you, like you now have the co-pilots, and actually create an intelligent system that interacts with you and describes images in a more intelligent way, that's the way to do it, with either language service or the OpenAI service, and actually mix it with the computer vision and to have better descriptions of images. They are more than perfect, okay? So anyway, document intelligence is what we used for that menu on the video. So to actually detect that there's a menu on the video, read the headers and then read the details, etc. Frank, I do apologize. I'm running out a bit over time. Sorry about that. Let me just wrap this up. And sorry about that. Last one, which is the other ones are not as interesting for our scenarios, but immersive reader actually includes the read alouds. And if you are on Teams, let me just do this. Okay, so see you soon. You can do a right click, and the right click on my mouse isn't working very well. Sorry about that. Let me just use my touch screen. So give me a second. For some reason, my right click isn't working very well. So, okay. So for some reason, yeah, I do have that problem with my mouse. So anyway, with things like Teams, if you right click on this, and trust me, I am trying. So I am trying to do it from here, and I do have a problem. Sorry about that. But if you manage to work it out, you can actually see things in something which is called the immersive reader, in which you can read some phrases individually. So one by one, it focuses on the phrase. So if you have someone that has so many difficulties seeing all the phrases together, or they want to see words separately, so first words, first syllable, second syllable separately, and this is literally useful for someone who's learning to read, 6 years old, learning to read, also very useful as well. So extra options, and they separate different colors for the adjectives, the nouns, the verbs, etc. So very, very useful. Apologies for not being able to do this. I also have a difficulty with my mouse, in which this time the touch screen for some strange reason didn't solve. Okay. So anyway, oh, one last thing. If anything, if you go to this, so I posted this, one of the things you can do when you post this is use alt texts, okay? If anything you can take out of this session, the first thing is every time you post an image, please post an image and make a description of it, okay? If you go to some places like even on PowerPoint, you can click on a button to say generate the description. It uses computer vision to do this. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but you can say banner of session, the blah, 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 blah. There is a logo of this and that, etc. Just explain what the image is. You know, even blind people go to Twitter, even blind people go to Facebook. Use your alt texts so that people will see what you are doing there. Plus, it's actually very good for indexing as well, because that alt text indexes your contents as well, so you get promotion of your posts in the famous algorithms, okay, of Facebook and Twitter, okay? So use it, it's a very good idea. Anyway, we have questions, not time for questions, but Frank, if there's any questions there, please let me know.
At the moment, I think, are there any questions? Anyone? No questions?
Okay, so let me just say this. There are some links here, okay? Most of this that you want are the WCAG if you are developing websites. Microsoft Accessibility, just go to microsoft.com/accessibility and you jump to the other places. Microsoft's Azure AI services or cognitive services in the old name, just go to azure.com products and have a look at all of these AI services. They will help you. The ones that come with Windows, the ones that come with Office will help you be more productive, but they will also help you if you have any limitation, whether it is permanent or temporary. And please do one thing as well. If you know someone with any of these kinds of limitations, get them to use these technologies, okay? Not only develop for these technologies, but get them to use them. They might not know that these technologies exist in Windows. Most people don't, okay? So please use them. Please share to everyone that they exist, okay? They will be useful for you even if you don't have disabilities. They are very practical, but they will definitely be useful for someone who does have any kind of limitation. And if they know about it, they will you will make their lives better, okay? So this is my session. Frank, I want to thank you very much for having me here, and apologies for running out of time.
Continue here, André. Very important topic, I think, and yeah, thank you for giving us this session.
Thank you very much, Frank. Really, really happy to be here. Anyway, guys, I wish I was there this time because I know you guys have food and things like that there. I don't have food here.
but maybe next time.
I will promise that next time I get selected, I will do my absolute possible and impossible to physically be there. And by the way, one other thing as well, if you have disabilities, the pandemic actually helped with this and made it normalized. A lot of people with disabilities, for instance, if you are blind, they would have to physically go to their workplace. All of the blind people that I know now work from home. People with neuro disabilities, neuro differences or limitations, they now work from home, okay? Autism, etc. They work from home. They can do their job from home. They don't have the social constraint of having to go in person. And the pandemic really will help with that. And this session was remote. I want to thank you very much for watching the session. And it was remote, but the technology does permit this. So in the future, hopefully, more technologies will permit more and more for everyone to be handled equally, okay? So Frank and everyone, thank you very much for having me and have a great event. Okay.
Bye.